Hello, I'm here to give the case study for lesson plan 3, the need for project management metrics. So this was the 8-part study, and it was interesting seeing a company going from basically having what our textbook calls the project management 1.0 metrics, basically covering cost and time of a project, to having full-fledged numbers and matrices that will cover a lot more pieces of a project to help determine if it's working and saving money, using money effectively, and time effectively. So I'll go through each part and answer the questions that came from them. So the first question, can the failure of R&D actually be this devastating to a company? So yes, I said it sounds like the company relies on research and development to conduct all other business. 2, when project work goes bad and failures occur, is it common practice for finger pointing and the laying of blame to occur, even at executive level? So I mean, yeah, if anybody's been at any kind of board meeting, been in a meeting with anybody at the executive level, generally the executives don't point fingers, but they kind of allude to the fact that somebody is at fault. So it's still the same thing as finger pointing without actually, this is your fault. Number 3, what information is found in Exhibit 1? So failure identification per life cycle phase shows the projects and where the plug was pulled in each project. Number 4, what information is lacking in Exhibit 1? So I said the stage of completion and the stage of completion that the stage was in. It doesn't say what phase or what stage was completed. It just says, hey, we're pulling the plug, and this is how much money was used, rather than saying we were good at this much money until this stage and then it tanked, or we used all of our money, or this is what happened. So there was no real reason, it was pulled. Number 5, is it possible that highly talented resources can overthink a research and development project to the point where they look for the most complicated solution rather than the simplest solution? So I said this is always possible at any level. A lot of people who are up at that level and thinking at that level have done other projects that are similar or have been in their field for quite a good while. And then they, rather than looking at the simple solution, not that they don't look at it, that they look at it as, oh, it's too easy, we gotta do something better. They look at a really complicated solution, and then they end up making something really, really complicated that didn't need to be complicated. Number 6, is it good or bad to have 5 research and development projects out of 12 completed successfully? So I said yes, it's bad, especially when the amount of money that was wasted taking these projects near to completion before realizing they were not successful. So they kind of said, okay, you guys know what you're doing, go. And I feel like they didn't take the right amount of time to say, okay, this much money for this phase, this much money for this phase, this much money for this phase, and then allocate resources properly and track it properly. So I thought it was pretty awful that they allowed these projects to go to that much of a completion without deciding, well, maybe this is not going right. Number 7, can a PMO prevent failure? No. Project management office can suggest and advise, but they merely advise the way to complete the project successfully. They cannot make the process or functional managers do it any other way. So the functional managers really have more suggestions and more say in what their resources do. The project manager can advise and say, well, I think that the resources should do this, but the functional manager usually ultimately will have the final say. Number 8, it is inherently dangerous to encourage a project manager to recommend that his or her project can be terminated during life cycle phases. I mean, this makes project managers sound like we're crazy, which maybe we are. I don't know. But I don't think it's inherently dangerous to suggest this. I think that suggesting as a functional manager or anybody else to a project manager that maybe this isn't working and should be terminated, I mean, is a viable suggestion, and it needs to be raised if that is something there. But we are not dangerous people, and it is not a dangerous suggestion. I'm not crazy. Number 9, who, if anyone, should be blamed for the failure of the projects in the case study? So I said it seemed like a combination of the PMO and the functional manager of the research and development department possibly the executive. It's kind of hard to tell without a lot of information who is at fault, but it seems like maybe the research and development people thought, we can do this, let's do it, and maybe didn't take time to see how much money was spent on each task. The PMO, I don't think was managing it properly or reporting it properly to the executives and didn't keep everybody in the loop properly. And then the executives can be at fault because they didn't ask more questions. They didn't say, well, how much money are we spending on this? And do we overspend? Where are we at tasks? Have they been completed on time? What's all the paperwork you have? I don't think the right questions were asked or presented properly. Number 10, is Anne Hawthorne's description of engineers realistic? I said, I have not worked with many engineers, so I cannot say, but the ones in this company seem like they are eager to please and are not concerned with the budget. So they want to get it done, much like the people in the research and development area. They want to get it done, they want to get it done right, and they want to take the time to do it right and properly, but they don't consider that there's money involved in everything that they do, or they're not concerned with how much money it's costing. Number 11, would you agree with Al Gray that the real cause of the failures appears to be a lack of good metrics? If this is the cause, then how would you justify that other projects were successful? And I said, it seems odd that everyone is centered around needing metrics to make each project successful, but having these metrics would not solve other problems. It is a good start. So having the metrics will allow you to see where projects are, how they're doing, how they're not doing, how they're progressing or not progressing, and how to correct and make them more successful. But I don't think that metrics will guarantee how successful a project is. Number 12, should the PMO take the lead in establishment of the metrics? I said yes. The PMO will know what metrics they need and want to look at to help the success rate of their future projects. Not saying that they shouldn't have the final decision and say these are the only metrics they need. I think that if they take the lead on it, then they can use this project to help other projects succeed, saying these are the metrics we need to follow, these are the metrics the executives need, these are the metrics the functional managers need, these are the metrics the project managers need. Put all those together. And the final question for part A, are a few days enough time for the follow-up meeting, and should the executives attend? I said with the history of this company, I don't think a few days will solve everything, but it's a start. So they can have their own mind mapping sessions, bring those mind maps that each of them made to a brainstorming session, put their ideas on the table, and go from there. So the second part didn't have as many questions because they started working. They started using and having ideas for some of these metrics. So the first question is there a relationship between the capturing of best practices and the development of new metrics? So I said yes. When you know the practices, the best practices, you know what the department is most focused on and what you can make, and you can make new metrics based on those. I don't know, I'm having a hard time reading today. So if you have the best practices from each department and you know what each department is supposed to do, you can decide what metrics and how to base metrics, what the baseline of the metrics would be for, and then how to establish what they're really good at, what they can improve on, what they're really not so good at to make the best metrics. Number 2, is the makeup of the team correct? Should someone from senior management also have been a part of the team? And I said, I don't think senior management needs to be involved. The team is made up of individuals from different but critical departments and is capable of making informed decisions. I don't know if much else needs to be said, honestly. Number 3, does it seem reasonable that some people might feel that metrics can be a spying machine? Well, I know they're making products, but I don't think a spying machine is, it's another weird word, like saying it's dangerous to tell a project manager to cancel a project. And I said, but yes, I said in my experience, the staff that thinks this way are usually doing the minimum and don't want the company or manager to find out. So having metrics says this is how well I'm doing or not doing. And smart, intelligent people who have been doing their job well and their managers know they're doing the job well don't mind having these metrics, because then they can see, oh, well, this part right here I'm not doing as well on, so I can do a little better and be better here. People who are doing just the minimum don't want people to know, because they don't want to look like they're not doing their job, even though they're really not. Number 4, are the 4 questions posed by John correct? So the 4 questions are, what metrics should we select? How will the metrics be measured? How will the metrics be reported? And how will management react to the information? I swear, I am not reading well today, I'm sorry. And I said yes, these seem smart and attainable to make. Status reporting is at its best. And I found in our textbook by Kersner a quote, with PM 1.0, status reporting was based upon just 2 primary metrics, time and cost. So having these other metrics here will definitely assist. Question 5, what metrics would you include in the list that may be appropriate for innovation projects? So I thought about this. My role in my company, we do a lot of innovation projects. We take a lot of manual processes and try to make them more AI focused or more recurring, so we don't actually have to do anything. We just go in there, refresh, and it's done. So I thought about budget usage, effectiveness of resource allocation. I also thought about, what else would be helpful in extra metrics. I mean, for innovation projects, maybe tracking, maybe doing more of like an agile type approach where you do each piece and then test it and see if it works, rather than doing the whole thing and saying, oh, this didn't work. Doing an agile focus would definitely help it, and then see if that piece of it is effective. Just adding this one step or taking away this one step, changing this one step, and how it would fix it. So the third part, what are the risks of reporting on too many metrics? As we stated in the case study, or as stated in the case study, the resources will take working time away to focus on calculating these and metrics and reporting. So I found another quote from Kersner. It says, the real fear with the quest for metrics, when a metric mania mentality sinks in and people look for the maximum number of metrics that can be collected rather than just what is needed. So I kind of feel like this company is maybe going to that and being a metric maniac, I guess, since we're using those kind of words in this case study, that they're like, well, let's find all the metrics and let's just get them all, and then that's just going to make us better. And they're going a little crazy, and they're taking on too many at once. And maybe that's the approach, is to find all the metrics possible and then decide which ones are more important. But I feel like so far that they're just going a little crazy with it. But yes, if you have too many metrics, then all you're doing is reporting on the metrics and not really focusing your time on the project. So it doesn't necessarily take more money from the project, it takes time, and it extends the time to complete the project. Number 2, what are the risks of reporting on too few metrics? So also, as stated in the case study, the executives will not see the complete story and focus on the changes, and they will focus on the changes on the few metrics to look at. So if you give them 2 metrics, and one of them last week was 50% and then today is 49, I mean, that's a huge thing. Oh my God, what did we do? We're going backwards. Why is this project failing? Rather than them seeing, it's okay, this metric is fine, because they only have 2 metrics to look at. So if you have 10 to 12 metrics, you can say, yes, this one is down 1, however, these other metrics are positive, which flow into this, that kind of thing. Or we added more metrics from the last time, so it looks like it's lower, but it's really not. So the next one, using Exhibit 2, categories of the metrics in Exhibit 1. So I gotta go to my spreadsheet here. It has a load, so give it a second here. I'm gonna turn on the fan. Had a lot of coffee, so the blood's rushing everywhere. All right, so this one is a chart that has the different metrics that they focused on, and it divides them into if they're quantitative, practical, directional, actionable, financial, they're a milestone, or they're part of the end result. So I forgot the question, I'm sorry. Categories of the metrics. All right, so I'm going to read them off. I'm actually going to read them off in the category that I put them in to make sure they work. So the first one is quantitative. So I found the number of cost revisions and the number of schedule revisions. The practical ones are the percent of actual versus planned baseline completed, percent of actual versus planned best practices used. The next ones are the directional. I have number of critical assumptions, percentage of critical assumptions that have changed, and number of critical constraints. Sorry, I looked at another one while I was trying to say that. The next ones I have are actionable, so I found a few more that were actionable out of all of these. Number of assigned versus planned resources, quality of assigned versus planned resources. The complexity factor, I'm not really sure exactly what the complexity factor is, but I figured it was actionable, I guessed. I think a lot of this could be guessing, kind of based on what the metric is called, can help you categorize these. Number of scope change control meetings is definitely actionable. The last one was percent or work packages with critical design. The financial I found was a net operating margin, obviously. There's a lot of other these that are financial, but I felt like, well, a lot of metrics can be financial, but I felt like this one was the most. The rest of them are kind of, you know, cost revisions. Yeah, that can be financial, but I also had that one in quantitative because you're given that information there. The next two are milestones. So I put percent of work packages on schedule and the percent of work packages on budget. I feel like those would be milestones because you need to know what work stage you're in, which translates to how many work packages are complete, on schedule, and within budget. And then the end result I picked was the customer satisfaction rating. Now these may not be right, but these are the ones that I felt belonged in these categories. And I think at this stage of the company's metrics development, it's a good start, and then things can change and morph and come together or be erased or whatever happens there. So part 4, is there a simple way to differentiate between a metric and a KPI? So I found some definitions. I said a KPI is a metric specifically related to decision making. All KPIs do have targets. If we are meeting or exceeding the target, then that's good. If we are not, then we must decide whether a correction is possible or whether we should cancel the project. On innovation projects, KPIs serve as early indicators of success or failure, and that's by Kersner, our textbook. So most of these are innovation projects, so the KPI will tell us if we're on our way or not. So KPIs are definitely going to be helpful for this company, but identifying what a KPI is or what KPI should be used per project can be a little difficult. So knowing is, what I found was they said all KPIs are metrics, but not all metrics are KPIs. And I thought that was pretty interesting, that all KPIs are a metric, and they're just something that's a little more important or higher on the metric rating for that project if they are considered a KPI. So number 2, what factors determine how many KPIs should be reported? So I said it depends on the project, and it really does. If a project is huge and giant, you're going to need more. You're going to need more per phase. Some of them will drop off after a phase or a stage is completed, and some will pop up as a new stage or phase comes into play. And I said executives or business partners can ask for different KPIs, and the life cycle phase may require different KPIs. So I think those are the main factors. I mean, there could be other ones, but some of the main factors. With the customer ones, the business partner, the executive, what maybe the functional manager is looking for, and then what the life cycle phase requires. So number 3, using the KPI selection criteria in Exhibit 1, complete Exhibit 2. So this is another Excel spreadsheet. Let me transfer over to that. My iPad likes to think. Okay, it's going. So that one. So this. So Exhibit 1 was the metrics that they came up with, and Exhibit 2 is this one, which has a chart of the metric, if it's predictive, measurable, actionable, relevant, or automated. So some of them I have on multiple ones, so I think that we'll just go through like I did before, and I'll tell you all the predictive ones, and then we'll go through that way. I think that might help a little bit. So the predictive ones, I said net operating margin can be predictive because you have how much you want to spend, what the budget is, so you can predict this. It could change. However, I think this is pretty predictive. Number of unstaffed hours is predictive. Schedule variance, cost variance, schedule performance index, and cost performance index. These are predictive. Yes, they change, but you can predict what they could be. There's a lot of them in the measurable. Percent of work packages on schedule and on budget. Number of assigned versus planned resources, and quality of assigned versus planned resources. Customer satisfaction rating, percent of critical assumptions that have changed, number of cost revisions, number of schedule revisions, number of scope change control meetings, percent or work packages with critical designation. So those are my measurable ones. I know I'm reading a lot here, but kind of how this section is, I guess. So the actionable ones I found were percent of actual versus planned baselines completed and percent of actual versus planned best practices used. Number of critical assumptions, percent of critical assumptions that have changed, and number of critical constraints. So if you notice, some of these have started to overlap because I feel like they are both. And I feel like as the company moves into a little side, well, this one definitely is here, this one definitely is here, or yeah, this one should be in both. So the relevant one, I also have percent of work packages on schedule and on budget. Then I have percent of actual versus planned baselines completed. The complexity factor, again, I really don't know what the complexity factor is. I didn't really get it, or they didn't really explain it, so I put it in here. Number of cost revisions, number of schedule revisions, number of critical constraints, percent of work packages with critical designation, schedule performance index, and cost performance index. So the last one is automated section. So I felt a lot of these could be automated and can be tracked pretty easily. So percent of work packages on schedule and on budget. So if you notice, those are in 3 different groups because those are measured, they are relevant, and I feel you can automate those pretty easily. Then the last ones are mostly in the predictive column. So I think if they're predictive, then you can make them automated. I think that for data, they kind of go hand in hand that way. So net operating margin, you can definitely automate that because you can keep track of that and it can calculate for you. Number of unstaffed hours, turnover of key personnel and number of percent of labor hours and overtime, schedule variance, cost variance, schedule performance index, and cost performance index. So because these are mostly numbers, those can be automated. So the number of cost revisions, number of schedule revisions, those kind of things, you can predict those, but I really don't think that they can be predicted. Because when you make a project, you don't think anything's going to change. I mean, you know they're going to, but you don't really think they're going to. So you don't really put them in there. Now Word has to think. We're going to go to the next section when it gets there. Maybe we'll be done. I don't know. Okay, here we go. I think I've had my iPad for a few years, and I watch Hulu on it a lot, so it's like, what are you doing, work? Okay. Let's see. Oh, and the last question of the 4th one is how many of these metrics in Exhibit 2 are now considered KPIs? So I guess 11. That may not be correct, but that's kind of what it looked like based on there. So the 5th part, can any KPI be measured? And I was kind of like, well, yeah, KPIs are metrics. So yes, that was an easy answer. I kind of thought, is it really that question? But okay. Does Exhibit 2 satisfy the necessity for a target for a KPI? And I said in this case, yes, it is a great start and will need to be improved over time. For number 3, for each of the KPIs identified in the previous case, establish what you consider to be a reasonable boundary box. So I'm going to go to the last Excel spreadsheet that I have, which I did not open properly. Oh, it's going. I'm not patient. I don't know if you can tell. Alright, so this one basically just has 11 metrics, and we put the boundary in good, normal, superior, bad, that kind of thing. So the metric here that they chose to do, percent of work packages on schedule, I said normal. Percent of work packages on budget should be good. Percent of actual versus planned baselines completed, normal. Complexity factor should be good. Percent of critical assumptions that have changed, normal. I put cost of schedule revisions and number of cost revisions and number of schedule revisions should both be superior. Number of critical constraints, normal. Percent of work packages with a critical designation, good. Schedule performance index, normal, and cost performance index, good. So this is what I thought that they should be in for a normal range. And I didn't want to say any of them are bad because obviously you're setting yourself up for failure. So they're all either normal up to superior. Alright, so the next one, what factors, so we are on number 6, sorry. What factors should make this process more subjective than objective? So I looked up what subjective and objective are. So I kind of thought this was maybe backwards because I feel like maybe they're being a little too personal with this project. I think that being objective, you're a little more personal. Subjective, you're not. So I said taking it personally is when a project is canceled. So if a project gets canceled and you're really invested and they say, oh no, we got to pull the plug, it's costing too much money, you become devastated because you really wanted this project to happen, rather than being the opposite, not being personal and saying, okay, well, what can we do to fix it? Let's find some lessons learned and let's make it happen again. Number 2, if these innovation projects were for external rather than internal clients, who should have more of an influence in the selection of the value components? The customers or the contractor doing the work? And I said it doesn't matter. I said the customer gets to pick the value components. Yes, the company or the team doing the work can suggest, but ultimately the customer is going to select and say, no, I want this and I want this. So you can come to the table as the project manager or the stakeholder or the business person and say, hey, these are the ones that I want to consider. But the customer's going to say, yeah, those are great, but I want these too. Or no, those suck, I want these. And that's just kind of how it has to be. Number 3, can the value component change over the life cycle phases? And if so, under what circumstances? I said possibly. I said safety comes to mind here, the need for more than originally stated. So, I don't think there's much left to say about that. So, number 4, at what value contribution level would a project definitely be canceled? So I have just a picture of the value components, their minimal weighing, their maximum weighing, and their normal weighing value. So I said if the measure drops below the minimum stated above is when it would be canceled. So the minimal weighing value for most of them are 10%, except features were 20. So I would think if it drops below that, definitely that'd be canceled. But I think if it goes between the normal and the minimal, that's when it should be considered to be canceled, and when changes or something should be reevaluated, some kind of change process should happen. Number 5, under what conditions would a project still be allowed to continue even if it falls below the acceptable value threshold limit? I said, well, if the customer wanted it and is willing to pay for it, it's probably still going to go on. If you're still going to get the money and you're not going to overspend how much money they're giving you, you're probably going to still go on with the project. But at that time, you would probably reevaluate and say, okay, well, we need to increase this piece, we increase this piece, let's redo this piece, whatever needs to happen to make it more successful, so that way the customers don't think you're a bunch of lunatics. I mean, since we're using that word, all those words here. So this is part 7. They said it's in 8 parts and they did it by letters, so sorry, I'm kind of like this. G is the 7th letter in the alphabet? Yeah. Okay. What are the advantages and disadvantages of each approach? Because it sponsors, has a senior leader, and will help to advise. May become too invested and will fight to keep the project going for fear of retribution. Having lower and middle management. They're already involved and now have more of a say. May become over-involved and start micromanaging resources. So let's look at the sponsors again. So they have a senior leader to help and advise. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage, they may become too invested and will fight to keep the project going for fear of retribution, or because they're too personally invested. So the lower middle management, they're already involved and now have more of a say. So that's a pretty good advantage. The disadvantage, they may become over-involved and start micromanaging the resources, which we've all seen happen, which makes the project not work. Which approach would you pick? And I would say involving lower and middle management. With having a good PM, they can make sure that the lower and middle management are involved, but only to an extent, that they're not in there doing the tasks or telling the resources, this is how you do it. They're calm and they're helping. Number 3, can the exit champion use a different criteria, such as looking only at return on investment? I said yes, but only looking at one factor won't be enough to vest if a product is valuable enough to continue, which is true. Return on investment is a pretty big factor, because if you're spending more money than you're getting, obviously your ROI is pretty low. But looking at other factors as they go can help decide, well, I don't think this project is quite at this point, but we need to do this in order to get it, or you're going to have to cancel. So I think having the exit champion is a really, really good approach. Okay, sorry, I had to make sure what I was on. Now we're on the last part. So they've established metrics, things are going, yay, and now, from what I understand, they are so good at making sure that everything gets done that the production part of the team is not able to keep up. Which, yeah, is a problem, but I don't see it as a huge problem. It's a fixable problem. So the first one is, can a metric for predicting success be developed? And I said yes, but it could change. So you can predict the success of a project, and I think that's something that could be added at the beginning. Excuse me. But it's going to change with each project, or over time, or as everybody gets better at making these projects or products. Can a metric for predicting capacity be developed? And I said maybe. I said predicting is hard. You can over or under predict, and it's hard to know year over year to increase or decrease this metric. So the different thoughts of increasing capacity to make these products, I think, is a good idea. I think that maybe they were a little overzealous, but then you don't want to overpredict and say, oh, let's do all of this, when it doesn't need to be that high. It maybe needs to be right here, rather than over your head, you know? So the last question, what are the risks assuming these two metrics can be created? I said that the capacity can be utilized. So one of the risks is that will it be utilized? Or that there will be enough resources to build the products. What if the company cannot produce the new products and cannot find a third party within budget to do it? So what if you increase the capacity and these people don't know how to make this product? And it's too complicated, or it's way out of their means, or they're not educated enough, or because they think in this little circle, they can't think outside of it. So there's a lot of risks, but are those risks worth it? I would say yes, because they're doing so much better at making these products that having a bigger facility can also mean that they produce more than one product at once. So there's a lot of risks, but I think that these are good risks that they should take. So that is everything. And after 30 minutes, I've answered all the questions. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next time.